There it is, this is the 2020 Trek Top Fuel, and when I read initial reactions on the internet to the press release for this bike, a lot of people seem to think it was a pretty heavy cross-country bike and people didn't really get it. But now that I've ridden about 600 kilometers on it, all I know is this is a super lightweight trail bike. Now for the 2020 model year, Trek bumped the travel in the rear from 100 to 115 millimeters of travel, and in the front we've gone up to 120. Now, of course, for pure XC racing, there will be a new Trek full suspension bike that we've already seen racing in the World Cup. So this actually goes slightly more towards the trail side in the range. Now, Trek actually mentions it's more of a marathon XC bike, but I kind of disagree. Now, just like pretty much any other new bike, this one is longer, lower and slacker. But Trek didn't stop there. So the new model kind of got rid of the fully floating shock in exchange for a more horse-link-like design, but with a concentrical rear pivot, which should mean the suspension is more supple during braking. So I've already mentioned that it's longer, lower and slacker, and this XL frame comes with a 487mm reach, which is pretty big for a short travel bike like this. More importantly, the seat angle is an effective 75 degrees and the head angle is 67.5 degrees. All of that is in the low suspension mode because you can have a high setting and a low setting. I did only testing in the lowest setting. The chainstays on this bike are 435mm, pretty much regardless of the frame size. In my case, it meant the bike was pretty playful while still really well balanced. However, maybe if you get a shorter reach, it may mean that the rear can get a little bit loose, which could help on climbing, but not so much on descending. For me, being 1m84, XL frame, it was the perfect fit. It could have also gone horribly wrong, because with my inseam length of 89 centimeters on this XL frame, the dropper post is slammed all the way down. And so at full extension, it's at my preferred pedaling height, but you guys should really check with your local bike shop on what sort of frame you should buy just to get the saddle height right. So by now you probably saw that this is the not quite top of the range mechanical shifting 9.9 model. It comes with SRAM XX1 Eagle and carbon fiber wheels, carbon fiber handlebars, everything's nice and carbon. And despite all that, it still weighs in at 11.8 kilograms with the pedals on this XL frame. So as I said, this is not a super lightweight cross-country bike. Those would probably be 1.5 kilograms lighter. This is just a really fun, throwable trail bike that I really enjoyed riding. Now, the reason this bike is so light for a trail bike is this is a step-cast factory 34 by Fox, super lightweight but very stiff and supple fork. Really enjoyed riding it. And everything else, as I already said, is carbon. So you get these Covey Pro 30mm wide carbon rims. Really strong, really stiff, very precise, just great rims overall. The handlebars are the Line Pros, also in carbon. Now these are 35mm wide, but they don't have that harsh, just very shaky, rattly sort of feel that you get with cheaper 35mm carbon bars, so really enjoy those. It also comes with a Covey Pro stem. It is a little bit on the long side, but it does help with keeping the front wheel weighted in flatter seated cornering. When you are still pedaling, for example, or on uphill switchbacks, I kind of enjoyed the longer stem compared to, a 35mm stem on an all-out trail bike. It just made it more pedalable and kind of more fun going fast up a hill as well, which is definitely what you'll be using this bike for. Now, to me, it seems like yesterday when anything from an in-house brand on a high-end bike would have been sacrilege. But honestly, there's not really any of this Bontrager stuff that I would change on this bike, except maybe the dropper post, because one time it did get a little bit sticky after about 500 hours of playing in the dust. And then I just put some new lube on the seal and it worked perfectly fine again. Powering you forward and stopping you is SRAM gears. So it's a full XX1 Eagle drivetrain with the carbon cranks and all those sort of goodies. Nice and lightweight, it works as you would expect from SRAM kit. Anything up from GX kind of feels the same in my opinion. And then stopping you is the SRAM Level Ultimate brakes. So these are 2-pot brakes, front and rear, nice and lightweight, and they don't really offer a lot of stopping power, but you have to keep in mind the wheels and the tires are so light that you don't really need any more power than what this offers you. Now, something that really struck me were the tires. So these are the new Team Issue XR3s by Bontrager. They're a really nice trail tire in that they're really fast rolling with just a pure XC sort of tread pattern in the middle. But then there is a slightly chunkier edge on there. Just really nice cornering blocks. Also great for braking because the tire is quite flat at the top. So it's just a really nice tire, very predictable on turn-in and just when doing pure braking. It can spin up a tiny little bit when going up steep stuff, but they're really good tires. Also, I ran them with inner tubes in it because this is a test bike, and I didn't get a single puncture. Now, despite all this really nice kit and the fast rolling tires, it's not quite a hardtail just shooting you up a hill. But what does definitely help is the lockout on there. It's a twist lock, so a bit like an old grip shifter, but kind of more ergonomic. And it locks out the front and rear at the same time when you're just going over smooth asphalt or a gravel road even. And then when you get into a downhill or a Belgian bike lane, you can just unlock the suspension and save your back. And so with everything locked out, the bike climbs surprisingly well, even giving me personal best despite training a lot less than I used to. Now, of course, climbing really isn't the super fun part about mountain biking. That would be going downhill. So once you unlock that suspension again and just point it down some really fun trails is when the fun really begins. Again, this is the XL frame, but I just found it so beautifully balanced. I usually really struggle with weighting the front, and I didn't have that with this bike. Despite, the bars not being in the lowest position, I didn't ever really feel like I was going to go over the front wheel or kind of like loop out during some compressions. I just felt perfectly balanced. And the suspension mimicked that as well. The suspension is also nicely balanced, only 5 millimeters of difference between the front and rear. Now, when you point this bike down a hill, you'll notice that it's kind of like inherently stable without being lethargic on more mellow trails. Just little drops and roots, and the bike would still be perfectly composed, making me go really fast and kind of letting me crash in the process because I was overestimating my own capabilities because the bike was doing so well. It was a bit of a weird one, and I still don't really know how I feel about it, but the bike is so good that it kind of makes you push your limits a bit too much, both uphill and downhill. Now, because of wind and the insane amount of hikers on my local trails, I only got 1 km on it, but I'm sure I could get many more if I had this bike for a little longer. Now, of course, the suspension plays a massive role in that, and while 150 millimeters in the rear isn't a lot, I kind of got away with it by just running it really firm, like less sag than you really should, so that I had just decent mid-stroke support and a lot of ramp up towards the end of the stroke when doing bigger jumps and drops and stuff. Now, obviously, you could also get extreme progression out of it using some spacers, and then you could get small bump compliance and great bottom out, but then I found the mid-stroke was lacking a bit because it's 150 millimeters, you really can't have it all. And so by now you probably think I'm getting paid by Trek to say all these nice things about this bike. But actually, I just really enjoyed myself on it. Now, the bike isn't perfect though, so the first thing I kind of noticed, and that I would definitely like to be different from a 9,000 euro bike, is the spaghetti up front. There are so many cables going on, and they're not nicely managed or just heat shrink together, which is something I would personally expect from a bike at this price point. Now, a second thing isn't really a complaint, but just a trend that I would prefer to see in the mountain biking industry ever since I rode a Pole Stamina, and that is the seat tube angle. This one is 75 degrees effectively, but obviously that changes depending on how high up you have your saddle. I think the entire mountain bike industry should probably move closer to 78 degrees just to make climbing that much better, to keep the front wheel from lifting on really steep stuff, and also it's just more comfortable when you're right above the bottom bracket, or at least it is to me. And so to summarize this video, I absolutely loved my time with the Top Fuel 9.9. I think it's an amazing bike, despite this specific model being a little bit on the expensive side. Luckily, there are cheaper versions available, but what kind of was weird to me is that the next step down is 3,500 euros less expensive, and you still get SRAM GX, which honestly kind of feels exactly the same as XX1, and also some slightly lower tier suspension, but it would still be a really good bike at 5.5 grand. Anyway guys, if you have any sort of questions after watching this video, please let me know in the comments. I'll get back to you on those. But for now, massive thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.